So many people, their motivation to get married is because they want somebody to take care of them. But we're not ready to get married until we can make a life commitment that we're ready to take care of somebody for the rest of our lives. I hear you and you're right. And I can understand why you feel that way. Oh my God, that cuts down the stress by 50% from the get. And a lot of people say communication is an issue in relationships. Yes and no. Listen, we all know how to talk, whether it's sign language or whatever. So it's not communication that's an issue. It's effective communication that's an issue. One of the things I'll listen for is who is a sponge and who is a brick. A sponge absorbs, a brick, things bounce off of. One of the things I look for is who is listening to understand and who is listening to respond. That's number one. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but if a woman doesn't feel heard, acknowledged, and validated, she's not thriving, she's just surviving. Nobody ever died from a snake bite. What people die from is when the venom gets into our bloodstream and it goes to our heart. We are gonna get hurt in relationships. We're gonna get hurt in relationships. And people are gonna give us pain, but it's up to us to give ourselves suffering.
All right, this is another episode of Verbal Artwork with Mr. Rembrandt. Of course, I'm Mr. Rembrandt, and we have a special guest here today. We have Mr. J with me, and Mr. J is a professional relationship coach. He's also a certified betrayal and trauma practitioner. He's also a special education teacher, certified, and he's also has a bachelor's in psychology, and he is an author of a children's book, which we will get into all of those different things as we talk through this episode and discussion. So really excited to be here with Mr. J. So Mr. J, if you want to give, I just gave you a good introduction. If you want to just give us a quick breakdown of your background for the viewers, that would be excellent.
Sure, no problem. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. So I am Mr. J. I am a betrayal trauma practitioner and intrapersonal relationship coach. Intrapersonal meaning the relationship we have with ourselves, because I always say the relationship we have with ourselves sets the tone and standard for all other relationships around us. I was a school teacher for a long time, and I taught special ed and special education. And one of the things that we did in special education was have to create what's called these IEPs. They were individualized educational plans. And what I do now is I created an individualized healing plan. So I kind of used my training for my education that goes into working with those that are recovering from or on the healing journey of betrayal trauma. And my goal is to really use the lessons that I've learned personally to help save people a lot of the misery that I put my own self through after my own traumas.
I see. So the trauma betrayal therapy is pretty specific. So you talked about you had some personal experience in which led you to go down that route. So could you go into that a little bit?
Sure. Primarily, I've had, a significant amount of childhood trauma. And what happens is you, as children, you don't have the resources, you don't have the wherewithal, you don't have the tools, you don't have the support, so forth. So what we do is we put on these costumes of protection. And then what we do is if we don't deal with them, we get into our adulthood, and what happens is they kind of form into our personality. And then we go around the world saying, well, this is who I am. And it's not who you are, it's who you've become because you've never worked on that costume. And then what happens is you just self-sabotage relationships in your life and so forth. So certainly I've had childhood trauma as far as, my parents go. And in my adulthood, I've had experienced betrayal trauma and so forth. So that's why listen, I tell people all the time, I have an associate's degree in therapeutic recreation. I have a dual bachelor's degree in science and theater. I have a master's degree in education. I got all these certifications, whatever. But to be honest with you, when I'm talking with clients, nobody could give a crap about that. What they want to know is, have you been where I've been, or can you get me out of where I am right now? And so I always say I have a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks, and there's no substitute for experience.
Great. No, I like that. I love that. That's a good explanation, especially when you correlate your experience with your education. Um, so my question is, how can a person identify that the behavior that they are explicitly engaging in is based upon not just a personality trait or an aspect of the makeup of who they are, but it actually is trauma? How can they identify?
One of the quickest and best and easiest ways, to be honest with you, is to do a personal introspection, a reflection, and ask yourself in all areas of life, is what you're doing and saying um, contributing to the person that you want to be? Is what you're doing and saying and how you're living working for you? If you have relationships that are constantly going awry, sometimes you have to look at the common denominator, which is us. If we have jobs or if we sabotage relationships around us, that's a good indication that we have some unhealed childhood issues. Now, I don't want to be one of those practitioners that say everybody has trauma. But at the same token, I think people discount subtle trauma. And basically what that means is, we could grow up let's just say we grow up in a family where we have two parents, but one parent works a lot, maybe even has to leave for work. They're gone for long hours, long days, maybe weeks at a time. Um, Now, logically, as adults, we understand, hey, people got to go and work. That's what we got to do. It is what it is. But as a child, and you want your parents' attention and you see your parent leaving, we don't have the wherewithal and the understanding and the logic and the tools. So what we do is we internalize whatever they're doing is more important than me. And so so now that doesn't happen with every child, but it depends on the child. So that could be a subtle trauma that the child does grow up with. So absolutely, there's traumas such as, sexual abuse and verbal assaults and beatings and things like that. But there's also subtle trauma that we also need to reflect on and do a deep reflection to see, do we have uh, walls in certain areas of our life that we need to um, start tearing down? And it's much easier to ignore them than to face them.
Yeah. So would you say that a large percentage of people are dealing with some type of trauma to some extent? I mean, you did say that you don't want to, over diagnose it, because things such as trauma or people saying that other individuals are narcissistic or kind of becoming buzzwords, and you seem to take an objective approach to that. So what would you say, how often or common is trauma in the average individual?
Yeah, great question. And here's the deal. Depending on which professional you ask, obviously you're going to get different types of responses. A lot of professionals in my field don't like it when they hear little t trauma and big T trauma, but I'm comfortable using that phrase and quote and term because trauma is anything that overwhelms our coping mechanisms. And if you can find me someone who's walking around the face of the earth that has never had their coping mechanisms overwhelmed, I'd like to meet them. So everybody at one point or another has had their coping mechanisms overwhelmed. Now, the difference between little t trauma and big T trauma is how long and how impactful was that trauma. So was it subtle trickle trauma, or was it, you were, in a caught up in a child sex ring situation when you're younger. So I would say everybody struggles with something, and probably a good majority, if not everyone, struggles with some type of trauma. But it doesn't have to mean the life altering trauma. It could just mean some type of challenge that is rooted and stemmed from trauma.
I see. So it could express itself kind of more covert and subtle, implicitly maybe, and then there could be pathological results that an individual will acquire as a result of trauma, such as I'm just guessing here, but this is from what I'm understanding you're saying, maybe even like cluster B symptoms, like you said, withdrawal of some sort or needing of attention, like histrionic or borderline personality disorders are wrapped around some form of feeling abandoned or needing attention. So they can be subtle and pretty explicit as well. Is that correct?
Most definitely. Most definitely, to answer your question. Now, just to get into a little bit about my specialty is betrayal trauma. And betrayal trauma is a little different from other traumas for many reasons, but I'll just give you three. Okay. So what is betrayal trauma? Betrayal trauma is trauma that is at the hand of someone you have a primary attachment to. So who is that? That could be a parent. It could be your creator, if somebody's faith-based. It could be a boss, because you have an attachment to that boss. They're attached to your livelihood. It could certainly be a significant other. And so when you get betrayed, that's betrayal trauma. And that's a whole nother different trauma for many reasons, like I said, but I'm going to give you three reasons. Number one, betrayal trauma is a secret society. That's number one. So what do I mean by that? Let's just say, God forbid, one of your parents passes away, right? That could be traumatizing for us, absolutely traumatizing for us. But, we can call into work and get bereavement time. We can tell our coworkers and our boss, and maybe they'll bring over a pasta and they'll attend the services and then we'll get cards in the mail. Well, you come home and you find secret numbers under your mattress that your spouse was hiding and doing some secret things behind your back. You don't want to tell people. There's shame, there's guilt, there's embarrassment. So it's a secret society. That's number one. Number two, it's personal. You have a family member pass away. Certainly that's traumatic. Certainly that's traumatic. But unless you went out of your way and intentionally killed them, you don't take it personal. You find out your significant other's having an affair, you most definitely take it personal. And the last reason why betrayal trauma is different from other trauma is because trauma in general affects the here and now and the future. You have a parent pass away, you can't call them anymore. And so that could be overwhelm our coping mechanisms. You can't send them your kids' school pictures in the future. Betrayal trauma not only affects the here and now and the future, it also affects the past. The only trauma that affects the past. Why? Because once you discover, let's just hypothetically speaking, your spouse was living a secret double life or having an affair or whatever, now you can't look at pictures of last year. Now you can't drive by certain hotels or eat at certain restaurants. So betrayal trauma, which is my specialty, is different from, say, regular trauma.
Okay, so how would a person deal with their betrayal trauma, and or what are some steps that you would take to help an individual who's going through that type of issue?
All right. So that's a loaded question because here's the deal. I just talked about the IEP and the IHP, the Individualized Healing Plan.
Yes.
So I would need to know everything from what gender are you, how long you've been in the relationship, what kind of attachment you have, what's your love language, did you have previous trauma in your childhood? What type of betrayal was it? For how long? How did you find out? Are you rebuilding and reconciling, or are you moving on without the person? So, I mean, I'd really have to find out a tremendous amount of information before that. But, because I get people that call me that are bear hugging the toilet, vomiting because they recently found out. And then I get people that call me 30 years out saying, you know what, my so-and-so, my wife, my husband, my partner, whatever, we went through this 30 years ago. We're good. We reconciled, we rebuilt, but something just came up and I realized I didn't really heal A, B, and C. So it depends on the spectrum of where you are in the healing and what work you've done and a bunch of things. So I'm happy to give you some other examples, or if you want to ask me a different question or a more specific one.
Yeah, so let's throw up a hypothetical. What about a situation of infidelity? Let me just curate a situation. Let's say there's a husband and maybe not specific infidelity. Let's say there's a husband and he had a past life of different relationships, and he might have had photos from ex-girlfriends that he had in some boxes, maybe in his house, and he newly got married and he's in a relationship with someone he loves dearly, and the relationship is going well, the marriage is going well. Over time, what happens, he goes to work and she winds up looking through his things and finds some old pictures of some old relationships he's had, and this now has um, essentially traumatized her because she thinks now that these could have been recent photos of infidelity, and or now she just looks at him in a different light because she sees these photos of different relationships that he has had, and it's now causing her this type of trauma. And this is a friend of mine, a real situation. So
Yeah.
curious to see what you think about that.
Yeah. First of all, I would talk to them and say, where on the trauma spectrum are you? On a scale from 1 to 10, is this bothering you a 3 or is this bothering you a 7 with these pictures? Number one. Then I would ask him, just out of curiosity, why wasn't this disclosed? Was it a matter of intentional secrecy, or was it, and listen, I can say this because I'm a guy. A lot of times we lack common sense and we're oblivious. We don't think of certain things and women do, you know?
Yes,
Um,
of course.
so I would probably get into the intentionality of things as well. Because if the partner finds out, listen, this was not intentional, I absolutely take responsibility. It slipped my mind. I will get rid of the pictures. I will do whatever. And from now on, we can, moving forward, have more of an understanding, more rules to our relationship, what have you. But it sounds to me like she just probably needs to know intentionality. And is I'm guessing this is a opposite gender relationship. That's why I keep saying he and she.
Yes, correct.
Um,
Yes.
she needs to know, will I ever find any more secrets that you won't proactively first tell me? So I know I keep saying this probably to the point where it might be frustrating for you, but I'd really have to know
No.
some more information because um, some people will look at that and say, who cares? In the back of my closet, I got pictures too. And then some other person could look at that again, depending on any previous trauma, childhood, insecurities they have within themselves, you name it. There's a gamut of things, and say, listen, I'm going to tell you something. I talk to people who have been happily married, I'm telling you, 2 decades. Their spouse will look at porn once, and that's a deal breaker, and they're going through divorce.
Yeah.
And I'm working with another couple who are in their 70s, and the wife a couple of years ago, well, more than a couple of years ago, found out the husband was having a 38-year affair. And they're reconciling and rebuilding, and they're doing fine. So this is what I mean. It's not the circumstance that matters. It's the two people coming to the table and what they bring to it, and their willingness and their motivation and their stick-to-itiveness and all this other stuff that matters. I can sit here and tell you the most craziest stories. And I'll tell you, it's not things that keep couples apart. It's couples that keep couples apart.
Wow, that's good. No, I really do like that because from my personal experience, um, I'm young, so I don't have many health issues at all, if any. But what I do find that from a physical medical standpoint, from my experience, is that when you do have an ailment, for example, it seems that, and this is my harsh but objective critique maybe of the medical field, that they really do have a one size fit all rubric. And I really had a problem with that because while us as individuals, we are more alike than we are different. But when we have ailments, it's going to stem more from an isolated aspect about who I am, my past, and other things than a one size rubric, one size fits all. I don't like that. It's just the programming is to go through a series of uh, diagnostics, maybe some blood tests, some urine tests. Then they look at your numbers. Oh, well, your numbers look fine, so I don't really know what's going on with you. Maybe it could be this or that. So here's some medication, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And it's like I could have done that, and actually I could do better than that. So when it comes to that, I always say, in my opinion, the best thing a person can do, and this is not maybe on the social science, but more on the hard sciences, you kind of got to pay attention to yourself and know yourself as best as you can to kind of diagnose yourself, because a doctor in that aspect is going to kind of attach a one size fits all rubric to you. And that's just not that helpful to each individual person. So yeah, I like the examples that you gave, because I do see that, a marriage is supposed to be something that two people work out, and we're getting ready to get into relationships more deeply. And I do find it disturbing that one instance after a long committed relationship could cause the relationship to start sinking so incredibly fast. It is surprising. But to use an analogy of the Titanic, it does appear that what's supposed to be an unsinkable ship or an unsinkable situation or a lifelong situation, one potentially small situation that you think would be preventable or you'd be able to get through now causes the ship to sink into the abyss. So my next question is, when it comes to relationships, which we're going to be ready to get into, what are some top 3 things as a relationship coach that you have learned by being a coach?
Okay. I'm going to answer your question, but listen, I am
Yes.
obsessed with the Titanic. So when you brought the Titanic up, I have to go back there for a second. I'm not going to turn it
Okay,
into
go
Rose
ahead.
and go back to Titanic, but
Go.
I just want to say this. It's funny because I just recently posted a video talking about the Titanic.
Did you?
And actually, I do that often. I use the Titanic a lot in my videos. But one of the things that I said, because a lot of times when I'm talking to couples, and one of them has, had an affair or broke trust or stepped out of their vows or what have you, what I'll hear from the other person is, well, she wasn't perfect. She would do this and she would do that. Or, if the female is the one who stepped out and it was an opposite gender relationship, the male would be like, the female would be like, well, he worked long hours and I was alone. And you know what I would say? I would say, listen, the Titanic didn't have enough lifeboats. The Titanic didn't have the key to the binocular box, so they couldn't really see the iceberg far ahead. The Titanic did, I would say all this. I said, but those are easily remedied once they got to land. They're easily fixable. Flounder, the Titanic, was the iceberg. So we have to talk about the iceberg now, and then we can talk about everything else that was wrong with the Titanic. But we need to talk about, what ultimately brought it to its knees. Um, so it was interesting that you said that because I just released this video talking about the Titanic. Um, and I also, it's interesting too, because I ask people all the time, what sank the Titanic? And, one person will say, well, it was the rivets. They didn't have top-notch rivets on the side of the thing. And another person will say, this and that. And I believe, if you ask me, I think a lot of the Titanic could have been saved if there were binoculars. Not that you could have seen the iceberg, especially so dark at night, so far away with the binoculars. But when you are talking about the middle of the ocean at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're going at 40 knots, there's a lot of cold air hitting your eye. So what are you doing? You're squinting and you're blinking a lot to lubricate your eyes. Even if you had those binoculars on, I'm not saying you could see far and long and all that, but it would have helped with that cold air to keep your eyes open, that maybe you would have seen it. So it's interesting because I want people to understand oftentimes our pain, it's only because we assign it meaning. And I want to deconstruct the meaning of the pain that people assign themselves. Okay, going back to your question. Sorry, I can go off on a Titanic tangent. Trust
No,
me.
you're good. No problem.
Um, so a couple of things. Number one, um, I think far too many people nowadays are coming into relationships with the focus on the wedding and not the marriage. Number one. Number two, far too many people, and this is subconscious. Okay? Far too many people are coming into a relationship with the expectation that their spouse is going to fix their problems. The issue with that, however, is their spouse is bringing a tremendous amount of luggage and baggage and problems that they're expecting them to fix too. So it's like we're coming to the marital table with, I want you to fix this. Whoa, you have baggage too? You want me to fix? I ain't got time for that. And they're like, well, I don't have time for your stuff. What? Issues. Okay. Another thing is people just don't know who the crap they are. People don't know who they are. And I'm also a wedding officiant. So, sometimes I will do like some premarital coaching with couples. And it's so obvious that there's couples that are saying I do, and they have no clue who the I am is. How in the world are you going to give something to somebody else when you don't even know what it is you're giving? And the other thing too, the last thing I'll say, because I can go on and on, there's tons of this, tons of reasons. But one of the last things I'll say is, unfortunately, we live in a microwave society. You want a hamburger, go into a drive-through, within 2 minutes, you got a hamburger, You want a microwave, go on Amazon Prime, within 24 hours, you can have a microwave at your house. You want a piece of butt, download an app, and within an hour, you can go get a piece of butt. I don't think the people nowadays just don't have the stick-to-itiveness. We live in a microwave society. Oh, you disrespected me? I'll go find 10 other people that won't. So, that stick-to-itiveness drive is sadly rampant in our current society.
Jay, that's great. I couldn't agree more. I like talking about a variety of topics. I'm pretty eclectic in that way, as well as, movies and things and art. I'm pretty eclectic in a wide spectrum of different things that I enjoy and like. But I've been talking about these different things, and I'm glad to talk to you about these different things for a long time, with my best friend and other people, just trying to navigate life. I would definitely agree that those top three things or four things that you named are pretty pivotal to the reasons why. I mean, nowadays, you use a great example of the microwave. People feel nowadays that a lot of things are expendable and they have low value. You can just go and replace whatever you want very easily, very quickly, including people, with especially you have dating apps, whatnot. How can you take someone so serious when you can go back on the app and there's hundreds of people that you can just find a new date on? So that goes to dating as well. People just feel like, I don't like this one quality about this person. I'll go back on the app. There's a sea of people. I could just try again till I find that perfect person. Or the person I'm with, they have these problems and I just can't let them go. And there's not an understanding of, well, I have some issues that they might have to deal with, and they have some issues that I'm going to have to deal with. And, we have to learn to be understanding of that. Also, people might have a cliche perspective about marriage, for example, in which they think that it has a Disney or Hollywood type of lifestyle to it, when in actuality, it's very hard. It's very difficult. It comes with so many great and beautiful things, but at the same time, it's also work, and your partner will be there to help you, but also you have to do the work and know that you're ready for that type of relationship. And is marriage like something you want if that's the end goal? Because marriage is very different from being boyfriend and girlfriend who see each other maybe once or twice a week, right? So, would you agree on that?
Yeah, listen, we don't get so many people, their motivation to get married is because they want somebody to take care of them. But we're not ready to get married until we can make a life commitment that we're ready to take care of somebody for the rest of our lives. I'll give you uh, a quick analogy, if I may. Um, there's a type of eagle. I forgot which type, but there's a type of eagle, the female eagle, when it's ready to mate, it will go down and pick up like a stick from the ground, and it'll flap its wings, go high, high, high up, and release the stick. And it'll wait for what male can pick it out of the air and bring it to her. And then she'll go down there and she'll get a big branch, and she'll flap her wings, and she'll go high up and she'll drop it. And she waits to see what male is going to grab it out of the air and bring it to her. And then the last thing she'll do is she'll go down and she'll pick up this big log, big heavy log, and she'll flap her wings and flap her wings and flap her wings and go really high. And then she'll let the log go. And the male that can get that log from the middle of the air while it's dropping and bring it back to her, that's the one she's going to mate with. And scientists have discovered and found the reason for that is because the eagle wants to know, if our baby ever falls out from the nest, are you going to be able to get that baby from the midair and bring it? I need to make sure you're going to be a safe parent. More importantly, if for whatever reason I happen to fall out of the nest, I need to know you got me too. So people need to come into the marriage, not with who's ready to carry me, but I'm ready in life to carry somebody. Now, if both people have that mindset, obviously they won't be taking advantage of each other and, what have you. But I think so many people nowadays, our pride gets in the way. Nobody applies forgiveness. And I can go on a lot about forgiveness, such as you ask the average person what forgiveness is, they'll say, geez, I don't know. I have to think about it, blah, blah, blah. And there's everybody you ask is going to have a different definition of forgiveness. And the most important thing when it comes to forgiveness, not to trail off on a different subject, is that so many people have not applied it to themselves. Because if you don't know how to give yourself forgiveness, again, how are you going to give somebody else that gift? And people don't apply that in a marriage.
Wow, very good. So, this is going to lead me to probably ask another loaded question, but I respect the fact that your sessions are curated to introspection and they're idiosyncratic, which I think is great. They're individualized to make it more transparent, people understand. But from your experience, which there's probably a litany of reasons why, and you named a lot of multiple things about you learned about relationships, but when they fail, what appears to be the top reasons on why the relationship fails? One just says, I'm going out, I'm out the door. What seems to be the explicit answer? You got into this already some, but could you just hone down into that specifically?
I'm going to be honest with you. They simply don't feel heard. They don't feel acknowledged. They don't feel validated.
Yeah. Just like that.
Yeah. And this is what's interesting. I don't want to paint a broad brush with everybody, but if I'm talking to a male female couple, males are very linear. If you take like a rubber band and you stretch it, this is, again, I don't want to paint a broad brush, but guys like, hey, this is where I am. This is when I got to get to, one line. Women, you take a rubber band ball and this is how their mind works. And so a lot of times I'm going to tell you what happens is that, hypothetically speaking, let's just say it's a male female couple. The male broke trust. The female is now asking what A, B, and C. Immediately, where does the male mind go? If I minimize this, she's going to think it's not a big deal. And if she doesn't think it's a big deal, then she won't make it a big deal. But when we minimize, that's when she feels unheard, not acknowledged, invalidated, and then the wrath comes out. So sometimes if we would simply just say, I hear you and you're right, and I can understand why you feel that way. Oh my God, that cuts down the stress by 50% from the get. And a lot of people say communication is an issue in relationships. Yes and no. Listen, we all know how to talk. whether it's sign language or whatever. So it's not communication that's an issue. It's effective communication that's an issue. Because when two people come together, it's almost like learning another language. You have to learn German or French. It's almost like you have experience with how you talk from your family of origin, the friends you hang out with, your sense of humor, whatever. And so does your partner. And what happens is those can misfire a lot and misunderstandings come up. And then those misunderstandings come into missed opportunities of connection. So people really have to say, okay, listen, I used to talk like this. You used to talk like this. What's our new language that you and I are going to use together? And that takes work. Not to mention, Mr. Rembrandt, listen to this. And you know this. You're a different person today than you were 5 years ago. You're going to be a different person 5 years from now than you are today. So not only do you have to continually get to know your new self, the person you're with has to constantly build bridges to that new person. Relationships are a lot of work. So many people are so interested, like I said, in the wedding and not the marriage, because marriage is great when you go out for ice cream and you laugh and you giggle, but you know something, real life kicks in. And you want to know, in my opinion, when marriage, what real marriage is, when you're in the bathroom with your head in your hands, screaming out to God or crying, saying, I don't know if I can do this anymore. That's the test of true marriage.
Yes. Yes, it is. That's good. So
I don't think I
agree.
answered any of your questions. I just go on these tangents. I apologize.
No, you did. We are. I'm enjoying this episode. You're answering a lot of my questions. You're actually filling the blanks on a lot of things that I agree with, that I believe, and no, this is great. So, to build on top of that, I will say, not only do couples, when they have issues, seem to have different communication styles. Men and women, if we're talking about heterosexual relationships, men and women have different communication styles, which you just explained. And again, I agree that communication is not the problem. Like I've always said, when two individuals break up, they probably were doing a lot of communication by the time they have gone their separate ways. So a lack of communication, I don't like that as a reason why, because no, they were communicating, maybe not in the best beneficial way, but I rest assured words were coming out of each other's mouths. But so I will say, let me say this. I noticed that, you know, I have the privilege of working in a large company with a lot of different people. And like I said, I've talked about and thought about these different ideas for a long different time. That's why I have a podcast. That's why I like to talk to great and interesting people like you. So being in the locker room with different guys and talking about these different things, some who are married, who are not, who are dating, what I noticed is that as far as communication is concerned, that a lot of men will not understand their wife, for example, their wife's communication style, which will come off ambiguous at times. For example, the wife might say, a wife might have a problem, and the problem in which she's speaking about doesn't appear to be a problem at all to the man, and or it appears to be a way for her to vent due to the fact that she's feeling emotions or neurotic about something else that she's not addressing, and or it appears that she is just looking for attention, and her way of expressing attention is through bringing up a problem in which he tries to solve the problem by giving a solution, but she doesn't want a solution at the time. She just wants to be heard about her issue. So what do you think about those three things as communication problems that seem to be happening in a relationship? And I'll bring this in. One content creator who's a very popular content creator, which I thought was great, and there's no need to say his name, but he says when he talks to his wife, one thing he asks is when she's, and he's said it like this, when she's complaining, are you complaining because you want me to listen right now and hear you out? Or are you complaining right now because you want me to actually give a solution and and solve the problem? So which is, and he actually says that works in his relationship. She says, listen, right now, I just want to be heard. I'm just speaking on that. I just want to be heard. Or no, there's this problem and I need your help.
Absolutely. And herein lies what I've been saying is that effective communication has to be a new language that you and your partner create together. Because in his marriage, that's effective and it works and great. But the next relationship, I could see a woman getting severely upset being asked that question. So like I said, like it has
Yeah.
to be a unique thing. But going back to what you were saying, listen, I tell men all the time, put your toolbox away. Put your toolbox. I understand we hear a problem, we immediately go to our toolbox, we want to fix it and move
Yeah.
on. Put your toolbox away. Sit there and be present. And listen, I don't care mentally if you're horseback riding in the nude in North Carolina. Sit there and look in the eyes and nod your head a few times, maybe repeat a few things. If you can't be there, mentally and emotionally, fake it till you make it. But put your toolbox away.
Yeah. Very important. I think you're onto that. So if you're listening to a couple, this might be another loaded question, and you're working on fixing some issues with them, or more so, which we're getting into, what are some of the solutions that a couple could use to work on themselves if you were to give some advice, some easy, quick advice to individuals who might be listening to this, for example?
So a couple of things. I just want to go back to communication for a second. So many times, one of the things I'll listen for is who is a sponge and who is a brick. A sponge absorbs, a brick, things bounce off of. So if one of the things I look for is who is listening to understand and who is listening to respond. That's number one. Number two, is anybody interrupting? That to some people, that's such a pet peeve,
Oh,
like
I
that'll
hate
set
that.
them off.
I hate that.
Okay. Number three, when one person is done speaking, is there a little bit of a time that the other person's giving them in case, because sometimes people just pause because they need to think of something. And then if the other person comes right in, it's like, whoa, I didn't even finish what I was saying. So, now some people appreciate that pause. Some people don't. Again, it's got to be what the language that you create together. Before you give your own 2 cents, are you acknowledging what you heard? Are you validating what you heard? Then after that, are you inviting them for you to be a part of the conversation? Like, for instance, okay, Mr. Rembrandt, I heard what you said. You made a lot of great points. After dinner, you want me to put the dish in the sink. I hear you, and I can understand why that's important to you because you don't want food sitting out on the table. And I agree with you. My perspective from that would be, and I'm just making this up. I have heartburn, so I can't get up as soon as I'm done eating. If I sit for 10 minutes, absolutely right after that, I'll put my dish in the sink. So you felt heard, you felt validated, and now I'm giving you my reasons why I wait a few minutes and not immediately put my dish in the sink. So you don't feel disrespected, you don't feel dismissed, you don't feel your issue was minimized. It's simple things like this. Now, you asked what people could do individually to help, and this is what I'm gonna tell you. We all have within us a trigger. So you ever, well, I don't know about you, but the average person that I talk to, they'll be talking. They're getting frustrated. And all of a sudden that little trigger goes inside where you either see red, you see black, or it's like, now it's on biatch because screw you. I feel disrespected. Now it's on. So I tell people, get to know your trigger and give yourself a timeout. Give yourself a time away right before that trigger goes off. And that could be in a form of a safe word. So let's just say you're in a relationship with somebody, you're having a conversation, you're getting heated, immediately say the safe word. Safe word could be anything, purple dinosaur, butterfly, could be anything. And what the safe word means is there has to be rules around that. Whoever says the safe word has to be the one that circles back around and puts it back on the table after they calm down. for you to have another calm conversation. And I tell people, I'd much rather you have 1,000 safe words in an hour than say hurtful things that are going to linger for their lifetime.
Mr. J, this is great and valuable information. Um, we're running out of time here, so this has been good. I will see. I'll ask one more question, and then we'll just give some closing thoughts. You know, the time has went back extremely fast. I've enjoyed this conversation. Enjoyed talking to you.
Me as well.
Last question. There's been a lot of viral videos going around about on these different like relationship podcasts, for example, this statistic of I believe like 80% of divorces are initiated by women. So what does this mean to you? Some people have their own hype. Does it mean, I don't think it means that the men are so terrible, so women are leaving. And I don't think that it means that the women are so terrible, and that's why they're leaving. So, but why do you think, in your opinion, I have my own or your observation or objective research, why do you think that it's typically the women who are leaving in relationships?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but if a woman doesn't feel heard, acknowledged, and validated, she's not thriving. She's just surviving. And nowadays, in where we are in our society, where I think it's 51% of all business owners and CEOs now are female, they no longer have the limited choices and resources that maybe they once did. Not now. We can also get into, feminism movement and all that stuff, which I think sometimes people screw up the definition of that, whatever. I think a lot has to do with uh, the no tolerance society that we live in. And simply what I just said, just the fact that, listen, I tell people this all the time, especially when it comes to males and females. And if the male steps out, I say this all the time. People can get over infidelity. They do every day. I work with them every day. People can get over infidelity. What people won't get over are the games that are played afterwards. Now, I don't mean intentional, strategic childhood games. I mean, it could be the subtle, not being proactively transparent, not being honest, not answering questions about the affair. So people can get over infidelity. They can't get over the games afterwards. So I think a lot of, and nowadays in the day and age of social media, you have what's called a lot of micro cheating, which a lot of people don't like that word. Fine. But those are those secret DMs that a lot of men like to send to women, oh, nice midriff shirt you have on because, you're bust or whatever. They'll say, well, I didn't do anything with her. It's not cheating. Well, and then if they want to minimize it to a female, she's like, I'm not playing these games. I'm out of here. So I think we're really shifting a culture of, for many, many, many different ways. I think some is good and healthy and some are not, certainly.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. J. This was a great episode. I enjoyed talking to you. I really did. You know, there's nothing you've said that I really I could say I disagree with on a large level or even a micro level. I definitely seems like you're really good at what you do. You provide, you have the ability to provide a lot of help to individuals. If you have any closing remarks, you can give them. Also, I have some of your links. I'm going to put that at the bottom of the show notes. And it was great talking to you. Last remarks?
Thank you. I just want to say very quickly, I appreciate what you said. All of my wisdom was born from pain. So I'm happy to share it. And I just want to say this. Lastly, nobody has ever died from a snake bite. Nobody have ever died from a snake bite. What people die from is when the venom gets into our bloodstream and it goes to our heart. We are going to get hurt in relationships. We're going to get hurt in relationships and people are going to give us pain, but it's up to us to give ourselves suffering. We're going to get bit. We're going to get bit. especially if we're in relationships and marriages that last 30, 40, 50, 60 years, we're going to get bit. We have to prevent that venom from getting into our heart, causing erosion and resentment and tension and hostility, and which leads to revenge and retaliation and all this other crap that destroys and decays relationships. So you're going to get bit. Don't allow that venom to get to your heart, which is why I tell people all the time, before you get married, plan on pre-forgiving. What does that mean? Having an understanding that I'm going to get hurt, and the minute I feel hurt, I'm going to automatically say, I want to forgive. But you first have to define what forgiveness is to you. Because a lot of people are, well, what does it mean to forgive? Just let it go and think it never happened? If that's what your definition is, fine. That's not mine, but whatever your definition is. Other than that, I want to thank you, Mr. Rembrandt, for your time and your platform. And I am here anytime you ever want to contact me in the future for any reason.
Sounds great. Sounds great. It's an excellent episode. Look forward to definitely talking to you again. And thanks for being a guest on my show.
Thank you. Good day.